4 years ago, Mayor Walsh set a new precedent by putting the city's top official for the arts and culture on his cabinet. The appointment of Julie Burroughs signaled higher ambitions for the arts, but also a new sense of scope and mission is outlined in the city's cultural plan, Boston Creates. Following the departure of Burroughs, the mayor has appointed a new chief of arts and culture, Elliott-Ortega. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
Start with your own experience growing up with a connection to community arts and why that mattered to you.
Yeah, I grew up in Providence, Rhode Island, and at a really young age, I loved going to music shows, and I loved seeing local art, and I would go to a local arts organization that had a gallery space, it had a small show space and a restaurant, and it was always free and always all ages and prioritized local art. So that was really my community growing up. That was my introduction to the arts, but also to having a welcoming place and meeting people and having a place where I felt at home.
How does that change a city, you think?
Well, it's interesting now to look back at Providence when I was growing up and seeing where it is now. I think it's been, the arts scene has been a part of what's made it really successful. It's made it a destination again, and I think that's what a lot of people look to the arts to as an economic generator and something that's going to bring tourists and attract people. But I think it also helps shape kind of the identity of a city and how we think of the narrative of a city like Boston that has such a strong history that's tied to the Revolution that we know very well. But arts institutions and access to art spaces also tells us who we are now and who we are as a diverse city and what it means to be kind of culturally relevant in Boston today.
Well, if you look at what's happening in Boston and what's in the cultural plan, the word destination has different meanings. It's not just these high-profile downtown places.
Right.
We're talking about the neighborhoods as a destination. Why should they be a destination?
I think the idea is that everyone should have access to arts and culture in their own neighborhoods. And they should be able to walk down the street and see representations of art and places to express themselves, places to meet their neighbors, and that actually that's part of a quality of life in the place that you call home, is to be able to find that around the corner. And I think there's a lot of opportunities for Bostonians to explore other neighborhoods and see kind of those individual characteristics and different types of cultures and people who live around the city, and we don't do enough kind of getting out of our own bubble and experiencing that in other places. So it serves both purposes, I think, being able to have that access close to home and then being able to actually share that with other people around the city.
Well, you had a key role in putting together the cultural plan, and part of your background is urban planning. For people who don't look at this all the time, what does urban planning have to do with the arts?
Well, urban planning has a lot to do with the arts. If we don't plan for the arts, it can be pushed out, it can be turned into other things. We lose the spaces that help us actually generate creative activity. And that's one of the things that we've been doing a lot in our office, is thinking about the intersection between planning and advocating for spaces for arts and culture. So I actually, in my role, before being Chief of Arts and Culture, I was the Director of Planning and Policy. And I worked a lot with the Boston Planning and Development Agency on thinking about how we integrate arts and culture into the planning efforts that the city is doing, and also how we think about arts and culture when we're trying to create new facilities and advocate for new spaces for people to actually be loud and be messy, which is something that's getting harder and harder to do in the city of Boston.
So that means if people say, what about arts and culture in the Seaport, this isn't just a BPDA. I guess you're going to be at the table on that, right?
I'm going to be at the table. That's the idea. So when we had the office created by the mayor and we had the position of Chief of Arts and Culture created by the mayor, the idea really was that the arts should be at the table. It should be a cabinet level position, and we should be talking about arts and all of these other areas: arts and transportation, arts and planning, arts in the police department, and that's really fertile ground for us to have more arts advocates in other parts of city government, but also make these connections that are really about introducing creativity and innovation into all of the work that we're doing, and not just being kind of siloed in the arts sector.
This has been the news. We're talking with Elliott-Ortega, Boston's new Chief of Arts and Culture. You mentioned arts and the police department. We're not just talking about sketches of suspects here. What's going on that's new?
Well, the police department just announced a new bureau for community engagement. And this is a really exciting opportunity. I hope that we get some good opportunities to collaborate with them on what arts can do to really connect the police department to the community that it serves. And we have some great singers in the police department. We have a lot of civic servants who are really great artists in their spare time, and there's actually a lot of opportunity there to connect people to each other and to break down barriers or perceived barriers of I can't talk to this person or I can't relate to this person. We can really break a lot of that down through the arts and through bringing in artists to help create dialogue.
And I think one of the things that's in the making is a project that unites police, survivors of homicide, and classical musicians. Why do artists need to be part of that?
I think artists have a unique ability to imagine alternative futures for how we can be together. It takes creativity to think about how to overcome some of those barriers, find new ways to relate to each other, and they can bring that. They can take risks in ways that maybe we've been conditioned to not take risks, and to connect the dots between things like that, between youth, classical music, and the police, and trauma. That takes a really creative mind.
Well, over the past few years, there have been some gains for some endangered performance venues downtown. There's another venue in Dorchester that's been struggling with ups and downs over the past few decades, the Strand Theater. Mm-hmm. What do you see ahead for the Strand?
I have a lot of high hopes for the Strand. I think it's an amazing asset, and we've been doing a long community process now, about a year long, thinking about what should be happening in Upham's Corner, and what the future of the Strand should be. And a lot of the focus is on community programming, on being accessible to the community, both for audiences and also for local artists and local performing arts groups. So our hope is that we can find operating partners who can come in and really activate the Strand all the time and make it feel open and accessible, and provide that programming that's going to be as relevant as it can be to Dorchester and Roxbury.
Well, another part of the arts and cultural mission is to be an incubator, and there are some grants. I guess there's a deadline coming up pretty soon. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, we have grant funding for individual artists now called the Opportunity Fund. And that's a small micro grant that we give out to artists who need to take advantage of an opportunity in their lives. And that can be something like needing to buy supplies in order to be a part of a show. It can be professional development, opportunities for teaching artists. So that's a rolling grant, and there will be a review period coming up at the end of the month. So we hope people apply for that.
And what about the Cultural Council grants?
The Boston Cultural Council has grants for nonprofit organizations that do any kind of work related to arts and culture, including culturally specific work, and those are open until October 15th.
Great. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
Cara Elliott-Ortega. We'll have more news in just a moment.